welcome to our audience from around the world for the latest instalment of Oxford at Home, the showcase for new research and thinking coming from Oxford University during this regrettable period where we continue to be locked down in our homes away from the labs and seminar rooms where we love to be with our students and with our colleagues. But we do have consolations and compensations, and one of them is the fantastic range of talks that we have in this series. And today we have got one that is not only an exciting piece of research, but also has a great deal of practical use for at least I suspect some of the audience here today. Today we're going to be hearing about 8 ways, count them, to quit smoking in 2021. Let me introduce you to our fantastic speaker for today. She is Dr. Jamie Hartland-Boyce, Director of the Evidence-Based Healthcare DPhil Program at Oxford, editor with the Cochrane Tobacco Addiction Group. She works in the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine here at the University of Oxford, and her talk is based on a co-authored piece which is available online at The Conversation, which you don't know is an extremely interesting website with a lot of think pieces on it. So that's something you're welcome to go and chase up afterwards if you want to hear a little bit more. And James is going to be drawing on her research today to talk about the ways in which we can think about addiction, you might say, and so how to overcome it. So she'll talk about 15 minutes. Please remember that whichever of the channels you're on, you're welcome to send in questions, send them in via YouTube, via WeChat, via Facebook, and they will be relayed to me, and I'll pick the best and put them to Jamie after. She'll speak for about a quarter of an hour, then we'll have about a quarter of an hour for Q&A. So without any further delay, Jamie, huge pleasure to host you here in Oxford at Home. Over to you.
Test.
Everyone for joining us today. So I'm going to be talking through some of the evidence we have on the most common and the most accessible ways.
That's YouTube.
Smoking. My research is funded through a number of avenues, including the university itself, Cancer Research UK, the National Institutes for Health Research, and Cochrane. And of course, with any research, and particularly research which relates to smoking and tobacco, it's really important to state that I don't have any financial or otherwise conflicts of interest to declare.
Test.
Funders, but probably for me the best thing about science is also the wonderful team of people I work with in the Tobacco Addiction Group.
That's
So
Facebook.
today I'm going to be covering my research, but that's also research I've done with them and some of the research they have led themselves. So I count myself extremely lucky to work with this great group of people. Cochrane itself is a global
Twitch isn't
nonprofit
going.
organization that I work closely with, and it exists to really help people make healthcare decisions. And this can be patients, it can be carers, it can be healthcare providers. In our research, it's often also guideline developers.
Oh, it is going. Sorry, yeah. Test.
And what we do in Cochrane is we gather and combine evidence to help people make decisions. So that means for any question we might have that relates to a health.
So that's
we'll go out and we'll search really.
we've got a non-smoking video in the background. I just Dragonflight beta's complete.
And in a systematic review, we not only combine all the data, often using
So we're launching Dragonflight beta.
sense of the findings overall, but it's also a really critical part of the process is that we figure out how much we can trust the studies in front of us. Unfortunately, not all
I want to be
research, and
right now.
we're bringing this evidence together. We're thinking about how
Actually, who do I want to
how
be?
much do we trust the findings.
I'll be a priest. Right now, priest. That's my.
And they are available for free access in the UK. They tend to be very thorough
I'm gonna
documents.
be a
They
male.
also tend to be very long.
That's my name. Can I be Dragonflight name? Dragonflight name. Dragonflight name.
There are some main things that I'll look for when I'm trying to think about whether or not I can do
Beta.
one is simply evidence. The number of studies and the number of participants. We have 5 studies. I'm going to talk about a lot more.
Great character. Okay, here we go. Let's go.
I'm not
Three.
totally free of bias.
I know.
All research systems, people, especially capitalism, the more studies you have,
I'll be a goblin. I'll be a goblin. Sorry, I'll be a goblin priest. Customize.
I'm gonna throw it out of the room. 1 second. Oh, we also listen to the radio at my household and my phone. That was the moment. And I apologize for that. So going back, evidence of benefit, evidence of harm, of course, because some can also cause unwanted effects. We're always weighing up potential benefits and harms. And finally, as I mentioned before, is the certainty of the evidence. How much do we trust what we're looking at? And for our cognitive views, that ranges from high certainty, which means that we're absolutely certain that the evidence we have is
Heroes of the Horde, the Dragon Isles have awakened and beckon the Dragonflights home. Meet me in Orgrimmar, where I am about to present the Aspect's invitation to the Horde Council.
So, for the rest of the time, we'll be talking through these done proper reviews on ways to help people quit smoking. The first one we'll be talking about is some of the evidence we have around behavioral support for quitting. So probably the most common and certainly the study form of is counseling. And for most of us, when we think of counseling, we talk about maybe two people sitting in a room or group counseling. Often it's through psychological and counseling for smoking
binding.
is that different. It involves talking to someone who's giving advice to you on how to quit smoking and possibly also trying to
Wow, this is neat.
So there is quite a lot of evidence that most people who smoke do want to quit, and that therefore counseling that's focused on how to quit tends to
Oh, this is tiny. Wow, this is a way better interface. These dots, these little icons are way better having little icons like this.
So this is something
32 spots.
healthcare providers through the National Healthcare Service, but at the moment it might be something
Let's go, we've got 10,000, yeah.
Certainly it was delivered face-to-face. Pandemic constraints in many countries that might be hard to people access behavioral counseling. Now the good news is that there's also evidence of remote forms of support without support, but that doesn't involve being face-to-face with someone else. So we have quite a lot of evidence on telephone counseling to help people quit smoking, and that can take the form of quit lines. So those would be, for example, toll-free numbers that you can call up. They're often provided by governments, by healthcare services, help support you in quitting, or you can sign up to services where a trained counselor will call you to support you with your quit attempt. We have evidence from almost 90 studies that helps people quit, but our certainty there is only moderate. And the reason for that is that though we have all this evidence, there's some differences in this. So some of the studies find clear evidence that this helps. Other studies find evidence that doesn't really make much of a difference. We don't really know why that is. We want it to be consistent, and here all of a sudden it's not consistent. We don't know why, which is why we still want to see more studies in this area. Now there are fewer studies, but also moderate certainty evidence that text messages also help. And these programs can operate in lots of different ways. It could be, for example, a daily text message to remind you. It can be some evidence-based tips to quit. There are some more complex programs which can recognize where you are based on your phone and say, oh, she's outside during her lunch break, she's in the pub. These are common triggers for her to smoke. We're going to send her some messages right now to support her. So a lot of evidence going on in that area that's looking quite promising. But there again, we need more research. One way that we know from evidence, we have high certainty evidence that helps people quit, is offering people monetary rewards for quitting. Now, these are programs where someone who wants to quit enrolls in the program, and every so often weekly, they're tested either by their breath, their blood, or their urine to see if they're still smoking. And if they're not still smoking, they'll receive some sort of financial benefit. This might be cash, this might be vouchers. Some of these are deposit programs where people deposit their own money at the government intervention and get it back over time. In the UK, these have primarily been rolled out for pregnant populations. In the US, sometimes we see these rolled out by employers as well, because often in the US, employers pay for health insurance, and for that reason, they have every reason to want their employees to stop smoking as soon as possible to avoid all of the cost and harm from continuing smoking. But there's still quite a bit of, because despite the high certainty of evidence of these work, some societal barriers to them being used and rolled out. And that is, I think, somewhat linked to a perception that in these cases people could have quit smoking, but they just didn't want to, and then we said we'd pay them, and then they did want to. And that, I want to be really clear, is not what is happening. Tobacco addiction is incredibly complex. There are a number of psychological, pharmacological, and for whatever reason, when the craving strikes, if we think of a long-term goal, so okay, I'm doing this because then in 30 years I might not develop lung cancer, that does less to influence our craving in that moment than thinking about immediate short-term rewards like I'm doing this because then tomorrow I'll be able to get my voucher. So that's something that I really personally hope we see rolled out more over the coming years. We've talked a little bit about behavioral support. There is also a range of pharmacotherapy, so medicines available to help people quit. Probably the most well-known of those is nicotine replacement therapy. Now, nicotine itself, I think sometimes has a bad name for itself because it is, of course, the thing that makes cigarettes and smoking.
Don't be using that.
But it's really important to note that the nicotine is not the thing in cigarettes that causes the harm. It doesn't cause the disease from smoking. It doesn't cause death from smoking. And so what nicotine replacement therapy does is it gives people an essentially clean and safe way of receiving the nicotine that they might have otherwise gotten from cigarettes. We have hundreds of studies.
I would like
over 130.
buy my keys.
Tens of thousands of participants and decades of evidence here. The nicotine
I would like
does help us lose weight, and no evidence that it causes serious harm. The most common side effects are due to the way it's administered. So if you have a patch on your arm, you might have some irritation at that site, some redness, some itching. If you have a lozenge or gum, that might make your mouth feel slightly odd. And nicotine replacement therapy is widely available. It's considered an essential medication by the World Health Organization, and most people can walk into a pharmacy or a grocery store and pick some up, but it's also available on prescription. Now, there's also some evidence, interestingly, that using two forms of nicotine replacement therapy at once is better than using one. What I mean by that is using a patch as well as a short-acting form, like a gum or a lozenge, can further increase the chances of quitting. I think some people are hesitant about this because they're concerned, myself more nicotine, what if I have taken it long term, what if I take replacement therapy, but it's really important to continually remind yourself, essentially, that the harm from smoking is from the other thing about cigarettes. So if you're relying on nicotine replacement therapy, you don't have any evidence that that causes serious harm or loss of probably the most successful medication available for helping people quit smoking is called varenicline, and it's trade named by more commonly known on Chantix or Chantix. We know, however, that this medication does come with more unwanted effects than nicotine replacement therapy, so this medication tends to only be available on prescription by a doctor or healthcare provider who makes sure you're getting off of it okay. I think some people might be put off on varenicline because of concerns about these possible harms, but that it's really important to remember that smoking is a legal thing.
Here is the hero I spoke
And
of.
absolutely, there's evidence of the benefit of how much it helps with smoking outweighs any harm. Varenicline works by essentially stopping you from finding smoking so weird. So if you're addicted to smoking, when you smoke, you'll get some reward sensations, some pleasure in your brain. And varenicline blocks those from happening. So it simply just makes
Our legacy will be remembered.
Now next up are electronic cigarettes, which some people think of as medications, some people think of a behavioral support. I think it's both, because I think they support people putting through both behavioral.
The Black Dragonflight will protect this world once again.
But when we think about e-cigarettes,
Wisdom guide us.
the amount of data we have on nicotine replacement therapy, really the evidence is slim, and I apologize for that, but
For Azeroth,
I shall help you prepare for Death Islands.
But none of them are available for this. Definitely really will look at them. E-cigarettes really theoretically for multiple varieties to help them transition off of cigarettes. So in our review here, we found moderate evidence of benefit.
I look forward to hearing what you've
High
learned.
evidence of
shall meet you at the Zeppelin once you've gathered our future expeditionary members.
If you don't smoke, absolutely don't start using e-cigarettes. But for people who do smoke, there is lots of compelling evidence at this point that e-cigarettes, though not harmless, are significantly less harmful, and therefore by transitioning to e-cigarettes, we can really improve your health. So coming on to the 7th and 8th, we've talked about medications, we've talked about behavioral support. Unsurprisingly, combining effective forms of both types will increase your chances of quitting even more. And probably the easiest way to do that is to go directly to a stop smoking or to your healthcare provider, who can support you both in terms of access to medication and to help you not only take your medication to use it correctly, but also give you other behavioral techniques. And finally, I think for a lot of people, the idea of quitting smoking, though it's something they want to do, can feel distinctly daunting. And there is hopefully and helpfully some evidence that cutting down how much you smoke can help you quit eventually. So if you feel like you want to quit, but actually just going from 20 cigarettes a day to 0 isn't going to work for you, there's quite a lot of evidence that cutting down how much you smoke can then help you quit in the longer term. Intriguingly, in tobacco addiction research, there's no evidence that reducing how much you smoke without ultimately quitting comes with major health benefits. So if you are cutting down, the ultimate goal is to stop completely. But we do have evidence that cutting down will help you stop. So I've just taken us on kind of a whirlwind tour through hundreds of studies and hundreds of thousands of participants, and yet somehow smoking is the leading cause of preventable disease and death worldwide. It's also a leading cause of health inequalities. So the things that mean some groups get sicker and die earlier than others. So it's vitally essential that we continue looking for new ways to support people to quit. And so finally, evidence base for this I'd say is probably very low, but I think it's quite interesting. I'm always excited to see research in this area. There is beginning to be some research suggesting that exposure to nature or exposure to pictures of nature.
I need to target something first.
Quit, so I put in a bunch of pictures of nature throughout this presentation. And there's a picture of me and my dog on a walk on this day. There's lots more information available in the article on the conversation, groups I work with, and also I'd like to point out that because the evidence
climbed any mountains lately?
coming out so quickly, and because there's so much uncertainty there.
Join the expedition? We'll do more than join. We'll lead the way.
So we're going to update this evidence really frequently, and my colleague Dr. Winston and I are likely talking through the evidence on e-cigarettes on podcast. And of course, most importantly, for more information and resources, absolutely look to evidence-based ways to quit smoking because we know they can help. In the UK, here the NHS is a great place to start. Thanks very much. Apologies for the disruptions, and I look forward to taking questions.
Jamie, thank you very much indeed. And I can tell already from the stream of questions that's coming in from around the world, I think that what you've had to say clearly has a great deal of personal interest for an awful lot of people. And we'll get to some of those in just a moment. Could I just ask you to confirm this? Is this something that, as well as as a scientist, as a sort of ordinary human being, have experience of? Were you a smoker who's quit, or have you never actually taken it up yourself?
So I've never taken it up myself. I do, and I count myself lucky for that, right? Because I think whether or not we take up smoking has a lot to do with the amount of advertising and marketing that is set our way as a young person. But I do have close family members who smoke and have witnessed them try to quit, try to cut down, and the challenges that come with that. So it is something that
I only accept
And
the
so this is
finest
one of the
crafts,
questions
the
that
dragon
well, actually,
irons, you say.
beforehand,
It will be an honor to join the expedition. I'll gather my finest craftsmen and prepare them for what awaits us.
Has there been more or less smoking during lockdown? Do you have any data on it? And then Chris adds, I've been fine myself as a smoker. I've found myself trying to smoke less.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. So, the data that I'm aware of is from the UK, and we had some research come out this past summer showing that more people had tried quitting than ever this year, and absolutely we think that is linked to lockdowns and the pandemic. What's driving that? I think it's probably a combination of factors. So, of course, it's a time where we're all understandably much more concerned about our health and therefore making more inspired to quit smoking. But also for a lot of people who smoke, there are really powerful behavioral cues. That might mean you're more likely to go back to smoking at the pub, or you're around colleagues who smoke, or people don't smoke this way. And for many of us, lockdown and those opportunities also have been removed, which might help more people successfully quit.
A question that just come in actually from Anand on Facebook, which is very much to the point actually. Do Australia have bans on tobacco ever work? Is it possible to ban tobacco? Some societies, of course, ban alcohol.
Interested in a snapshot?
That's a good the same. Or is that just
What a
really something-
remarkable opportunity. Imagine all the wondrous relics collected by the dragonflights over the ages. I will gather my wisest scholars for your expedition.
Eventually, it's not something that is being done widely, and I suppose one of the things that really concerns me more in these areas is that what we have seen are bans, total bans on e-cigarettes at the country level. And though, of course, I understand that, and we want to ban to make sure we aren't fueling another pop crisis, I worry about the message that sends in terms of relative risk. So if we're leaving additional cigarettes on the market, banning e-cigarettes, what message does that send? So I think we absolutely know that legislating smoking bans in areas, tax changes, limiting access, impacting all of those people, right? And our hope might be that decades from now we're in an area where people don't use smoking cigarettes are available, but that's not where we're going.
You flagged up in your talk, Jenny, something that in a sense is almost a question of interpretation. If you regard vaping and e-cigarettes as being essentially...
You made quick work of gathering our expedition members.
If you regard them
I
as-
admire efficiency in my traveling companions.
And maybe Claire's question is also getting the face of connection. This is... I'm not...
Let me know what you find. A surprise attack! Guards! Arrest this handsome wizard.
Should we avoid them?
Be at ease. He is an ally.
Apologies for my abrupt arrival, but the news I bring cannot wait for pleasantries.
Right? We absolutely know that which decades of misinformation
Don't let the magic dazzle
that
you.
have resulted in an unbelievable amount of preventable disease and death. But I also think ultimately the evidence we have, and much of that comes from really unbiased sources, shows that e-cigarettes are considerably less harmful. And for that reason,
The Black Dragonflight will protect this world once again.
It is good you have returned, adventurer. I have news.
So someone who had
Shush. I am thinking.
family experience that thought surely there's a better way, a safer way to design something that's kind of like a cigarette that isn't as harmful. And that is what we have here. And I think the question isn't really whether or not they're safer than smoking, because
Fair skies and Scale Commander Emberthal awaits your arrival atop Gromarsh Hold. Let us not keep her waiting.
Let's throw in one my part of my sexual historian hat here. Does anyone smoke a pipe anymore? Does any of this have any relevance to that? So,
yeah, great question. So I suppose some of these studies include all different sorts of combustible types of cigarettes, but mainly what we're talking about is cigarette smoking. And though I think
Let us begin.
still happen, I think comparatively to types of
Fair
cigarettes,
skies and strong winds.
but my very amateur understanding, there is some kind of patch of like the Netherlands and Scandinavia. I think there's more of it's in the UK. There's actually two generations in the 50s. Every college clubman goes to an Ivy League school and have an open top card, a sweater, woolly sweater, girl by his side, and like.
Serve with honor.
They wouldn't be able to use those in clubs now, you see. So I think indoor.
Quite right too. Quite right too. I'll give you a couple of questions here.
I am ready to serve.
Variations on themes about substitution.
What do you have to report? We will find our fate.
Okay. And then
Stay true.
are there any guides
I am ready. What do you need?
Sensation with food? And could I add to that a question that's come in, I think from Yasha, this on YouTube. And does your work have comparability in the sense that you have to put other sorts of issues? I don't know.
Let's get back to training. It was Neltharion.
Throw those two pieces
He
together.
gave the final order that sent us back to our crashes. He betrayed us.
And bid his ally Malagos to weave a spell that would put us to sleep under the guard of his blue dragons, where we remained, abandoned and forgotten, awakened only when the Primalists returned to break Razagath free.
Did Nosdorm tell you how long we were kept in stasis?
Nearly 20,000 years. While we slumbered, the kingdom of dragons rose and fell. The world was sundered, and the aspects surrendered their power to stop Nella, to stop Deathwing.
We only have each other now. The Drakthea need a place in this world. Maybe it will be in the Dragon Isles, or maybe somewhere else.
Therefore, I think it's probably fair to say that when we do research, we don't want to just do research in ways of construction and assume that that applies to other things. Like, it absolutely makes sense that there's a growing field of research to see in order to
What is the situation?
There is much to be done.
more than one substance. And then what do we do there and how do we do it?
What do you have to report?
I have to say, I'm going to give you a question here from Brian.
Let us
Watson.
begin.
Sounds rather personally directed to you, but perhaps personally
Serve with honor.
to Brian and the consultancy. Could you please put the following methods in the order of effectiveness? Varenicline, Victory, Patch, and Yahoo. I'm sure that he's over there taking notes wherever you are, Brian, so I wonder if you can help him out.
Yeah, so that is actually a more complicated question than it sounds that makes it out. One of the things that makes that a complicated question is the amount of uncertainty we have. So when we present estimates instead of we present what's an average, but then they're actually sit within a range. And because with e-cigarettes, they're so new and we don't have that much evidence, that range is really wide. So kind of
I could use your expertise. Keep an eye out for anything interesting.
But our bottom estimate might have been below the treatment. So if we kind of ignore e-cigarettes, we just don't have enough evidence to rank them like that. The latest research we have suggests that probably
Remember, the expedition Zeppelin shouldn't be too long now. Please, chat with your fellow explorers while we wait.
Or patch and bond, as I spoke about before. But I think the evidence is pretty clear that compared to just using patch or just using rosin, varenicline is more successful winning. And there is no evidence within, if you're only going to use one form of energy, there's no evidence that one form of energy.
Here's what perhaps less about the chemical reaction, more about the psychological reaction from Helen here on Facebook. What kinds of peer pressure might work best to get your friends to quit? So I think Helen's asking for a friend.
Okay. That is a great question, and I think it's something that honestly we don't have that good a sense of, because when we talk to people who quit stuff, certainly a lot of people say, well, you know, my partner was insistent that I did it. That was a huge factor that made me go ahead and do it. For that reason, what we've done is we've tried to test this out. So if we find something that looks like it might be effective, we'll do a trial and randomize one group to one thing and one group to the other. And we'll know that if we see a difference, it's because of the thing we're testing. So there have been a number of trials of different ways of what they call partner support versus substance. So essentially peer support, getting other people involved in supporting your prototype. And none of that evidence is particularly clear or shows us that one way works motivations, of how addicted they are, with how much support they have for quitting. So I'd say if there was someone in my life who I was trying to support for smoking, I would obviously talk to them about it. But the most important thing I think would be to try to get them evidence support in the form of medication, behavioral support.
Beginning to get to time, David, there's so much coming through. I just want to put a couple more to wind up. What is about questions coming about reactions to research? In particular, tobacco companies don't have the world's best reputation when it comes to trying to stop people finding stuff out that hurts their business. Has there been any sense in which your research has been targeted by either corporates or other entities?
I think no matter what area of science you work in, probably there's always someone who's not that keen on what you're doing. And in some ways, one of the best things about science is that dissent, as long as it's respectful. Actually, people having different ideas and different opinions can be great, and it's how some of the best science is being done. So I'd say probably I feel like I'm probably not prone to more of it than others, but it's something I'm always aware of, and it's a reason why I think it's important to be incredibly careful in sticking to the evidence. So when I speak about something, I speak about it based on the evidence in front of me.
Like you've got skill.
We try to be true, we try to be transparent, we try to be unbiased, and I try and stick to that. Therefore, so far, haven't had any big problems.
I think just to end us off here today, Jay, could you give us a picture of, in a sense, how big or how wide or how extensive a problem this is? Because I think most of our sense, non-experts, would be that compared to a generation maybe 50 years ago, fewer people around the world smoke cigarettes. Some countries I work on in China.
Adventurers, we shall depart for the Dragon Isles
in all
shortly.
its spiky glory.
So,
All aboard for adventure, my friends.
Finally, I could have flown there and back again by now.
I did not mind at all. While waiting, I captured some vibrant images of the coastal wildlife.
You'll get plenty of pictures in the Dragon Isles. So many new species to document.
And maybe get eaten by.
Unfortunately, that is not at all the case. So, smoking remains, according to some estimates, still the #1 cause of preventable disease and death worldwide. According to all estimates, it's up there in the top couple causes. And I think what's happened over time is that the people who smoke have changed, but smoking maybe hasn't changed that much. So the tobacco industry, we know when certain countries clamp down on cigarette sales, like put their attention elsewhere and target different groups. And we also know that smoking is now really, really highly correlated with socioeconomic status. So
I captained hundreds of smuggling operations, launched right under Ellison's nose. If anyone understands subtlety in navigation, it is I.
Are also more likely to smoke. And so I think the perception that smoking is solved is unfortunately far from realized.
It sounds like there's plenty of work for you to be doing for some years to come, Jamie. Very glad that we in Oxford University have been able to do it. Many thanks to our speaker today, Dr. Emma Voice. And if you want to follow up on some of those ideas, again, a reminder that on the Conversation website, Jamie's co-authored article is there, and you can pick up at that point. We are going to be back next week for more Oxford at Home at a slightly different time. Next week we're going to be on at 11 o'clock, getting an early start so that you can basically get your telescope out. So the subject is stargazing at home. It's with Dr. Becky Smethurst, known to some of you I suspect for astronomy fans, Dr. Becky on...
My artisans are the best on Azeroth.
Session through any of our channels next week at 11 on Friday. And remember that you can find all
Look at those ancient towers.
I
can't wait to climb them.
Imagine the mysteries they must hold.
Again, so many of you from
And all those fancy decorations. We can smelt into ingots for new armor.
Seeing you back here
Focus.
online.
Keep your eyes on the sky.
Thank
You never know when danger might swoop in.
We'll have plenty for you next time.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this evening's lecture here in the splendour of the Sheldonian Theatre. It is hosted by Oxford University's Institute for Ethics in AI and is part of the Obert C. Tanner Lectures on Artificial Intelligence and Human Value.
Thank you for joining us for CDC's Public Health Grand Rounds. Today's session is a new venture for us as we transition from live in-person sessions to virtual ones. To minimize any technical issues, we have recorded our speakers in advance, but they are all here with us today and will be participating in our Q&A at the end of the presentations. Be sure to email your questions to grandrounds@cdc.gov. With us today is the Surgeon General of the United States, Vice Admiral Jerome Adams. We are honored to have him introduce this special Grand Rounds. Dr. Adams?
Thank you for inviting me to introduce this important session of CDC's Public Health Grand Rounds. One of the most significant public health successes in modern U.S. history has been the reduction in smoking that has occurred during the last half-century. Today, the prevalence of cigarette smoking among American adults is at 14%, an all-time low. Although this overall achievement is a source of pride, there's still much more work to be done because 34 million Americans still smoke. Cigarette smoking among adults remains the leading cause of preventable disease, disability, and death in our country. We know that about 70% of adult cigarette smokers want to quit, and many of them have tried. And we understand that quitting can be difficult. The good news is we also know what works. We have evidence-based tools ready for use today. New FDA-approved medications, especially when combined with counseling, have been very effective. Support services including text messaging and web-based applications are helping too. It's important people know it's never too late to quit, regardless of your age or how long you've been smoking. Quitting reduces the risk of premature death and can add as much as a decade to life expectancy. Many of you have probably heard me speak about my own family history with tobacco. Several members of my family smoked, including my grandfather. Having asthma that was hard to manage when I was younger made this an added challenge. But beyond that, I also saw firsthand how smoking negatively impacted my grandfather's health. Its complications ultimately led to his passing. I share those reflections because they're tragically all too common. But the good news is we know that does not have to be our collective future. Everyone has a role to play to help people quit smoking. Healthcare professionals can start by asking every patient if they smoke, and if so, offer them services that can help them quit. Payers can cover medications and counseling with no barriers, including pre-authorizations and cost sharing. Policymakers can adopt best practices such as smoke-free spaces and mass media campaigns that educate everyone about the risk of smoking. And finally, everyone can share information about the free resources available to help smokers quit. For instance, by calling 1-800-QUIT-NOW. Over the last 3 years, more than 150 experts have contributed to this cessation report. Many are online with us today, and I want to personally thank them for their dedication to this effort. It is my hope that this historic report will help others who wish to quit smoking and put them on the path to successfully do so. And all of you have been a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Adams. We're honored to have you join us today. I'm Dr. John Iskander with CDC's Office of Science. Thank you for joining us for our first virtual public health Grand Rounds. We offer free continuing education available for physicians, nurses, pharmacists, veterinarians, health educators, and others. The course code is PHGR10. Please see the Public Health Grand Rounds website or the CDC Continuing Education website for more details. Here is our continuing education disclosure for this session. Please note that brand names, images, and trademarks are used for identification purposes only. Again, we invite you to send questions to grandrounds@cdc.gov. We may be able to include your question during our Q&A part of the session. Want to know more? We have a featured podcast on our website called Beyond the Data, which is posted after the session. We've also partnered with CDC's Public Health Library to feature scientific articles about this session. Full listing is available at cdc.gov/scienceclips. Here's a preview of upcoming Grand Rounds topics. We hope you will join us live or on the web at your convenience. Today's speakers are Dr. Brian King, Deputy Director for Research Translation at CDC's Office on Smoking and Health, Dr. Rachel Grana, Program Director for Tobacco Control Research Branch at the National Cancer Institute, National Institute of Health, Dr. Jillian Schauer, Senior Consultant at CDC, and Dr. Amanda Graham, Chief of Innovations at the Truth Initiative. Now, my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rebecca Bunnell, CDC's Director of the Office of Science.
Hello, I'm Dr. Rebecca Bunnell, the Director of CDC's Office of Science, and I want to wish you a warm welcome to CDC's first ever virtual public health Grand Rounds. Before I say a few words, I want to acknowledge the frontline public health workers and clinicians who are joining us today. Thank you for all your hard work, service, and dedication. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought to light many challenges in public health and beyond. It has reminded us of the importance of taking proper precautions to keep ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities healthy and well.
I need a thug.
As many of us have been spending more time indoors and in close contact with family members during this time, we are reminded of the dangers posed by tobacco smoke and tobacco products to those we love. There's never been a better time to quit smoking or to stop using other tobacco products. Each year, an estimated 1.2 million people quit smoking. Since 1965, over 40% of all adults who have ever smoked have overcome the challenges of breaking their nicotine addiction and have successfully quit smoking. As you know, quitting smoking and tobacco products yields near immediate health benefits to persons of all ages. Simply stated, it saves lives. CDC has worked closely with the Office of the Surgeon General to produce influential Surgeon General's reports on the impacts of smoking and vaping on health. These reports have become gold standards in public health and science communication and are widely cited in scientific literature. You may have seen them mentioned in both traditional and social media as well. The most recent collaboration between CDC and the Office of the Surgeon General was published in January of this year and focuses on progress that has been made in tobacco cessation, as well as the goals for what we must still accomplish. Today, we'll hear from speakers from CDC, the National Institutes of Health, and the Truth Campaign, a nonprofit dedicated to helping our youth live tobacco-free lives. These speakers will address the progress that has been made in helping tobacco users quit, what barriers remain, and what effective interventions exist to aid tobacco cessation at individual, clinical, and societal levels. Ending the tobacco epidemic is absolutely essential for our nation's health. It will take both prevention of youth initiation and cessation to get us there. Please join me in extending a warm virtual welcome to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bunnell. We will begin our session with Dr. Brian King.
Hi, and thank you for joining us today. The most recent Surgeon General's report on smoking and health, which was released in January 2020, focuses on smoking cessation, but it isn't actually the first such report to be released. This new report is part of a long-standing legacy of U.S. Surgeon General's reports on tobacco, which actually began more than a half-century ago to document the risk of smoking as well as the evidence-based interventions that we know work to prevent the use of these risks. Now, it's been said that in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been, and that's particularly true in the context of tobacco prevention and control. To that end, we've organized today's presentation according to the past, present, and the future of tobacco cessation in the United States. In the following presentations, we'll provide a historical perspective. We'll discuss the current tobacco control landscape in the context of the recent Surgeon General's report, and then we'll provide a glimpse into the future, including opportunities for expanding tobacco cessation activities to include novel products such as e-cigarettes, particularly in the context of youth.
I need to target something
Now, the first Surgeon General's report on smoking was released in 1954 by Dr. Luther Terry. Since that time, we've amassed a considerable body of scientific evidence that documents the risks of smoking. That science shows that smoking harms nearly every organ of the human body. And today, many people may think that the war on smoking is won, but that's actually not the case. We still have more work that we need to do. There's an estimated 34 million U.S. adults who still smoke cigarettes, and smoking causes 480,000
I'd rather
deaths
be
per year
hammering
in the
than
U.S.
talking.
Moreover, for every one death from smoking, another 30 Americans are living with smoking-related disease. And not all the risks of smoking are necessarily well known. For example, we of course recognize the enormous impact that COVID-19 pandemic is currently having on all of our lives. While scientific evidence is accumulating, we know that smoking suppresses the immune system, and that people who are immunocompromised are at greater risk of severe illness from COVID-19. But we also know that there aren't just human costs associated with smoking. Cigarette smoking costs the U.S. economy more than $300 billion per year in direct healthcare costs and also loss of productivity. Now, the decline of cigarette smoking in the United States is among the greatest public health achievements of the past century. And indeed, smoking has been declining steadily among adults since the mid-1960s and among youth since the late 1990s. Today's smoking prevalence is about 9% among U.S. high school students and about 4% among U.S. adults. That's a commendable feat, considering the smoking rates were more than 40% among adults in the 1960s and more than 35% among high school students in only the mid-1990s. But as I noted, we've still got more work to do. And despite the progress that we have made in reducing smoking overall that I just noted, the bad news is that disparities persist. Cigarette smoking rates are particularly high among American Indians, individuals with lower education and income, those who are uninsured or underinsured, those with disabilities, and those in the LGBTQ+ community. And some of the most marked disparities exist among those with behavioral health conditions, which is described as serious psychological distress by the survey used to obtain those estimates. We know from the available data that nearly 1/3 of individuals with mental illness currently smoke cigarettes, and about 40% of all cigarettes consumed in this country are among those with mental illness. So why aren't we smoking, the smoking rates even lower? And why do these marked disparities persist? Well, in 2000, Surgeon General David Satcher summed up the issue by stating that our lack of greater progress in tobacco control is more the result of failure to implement proven strategies than it is the lack of knowledge about what to do. So the bottom line here, folks, is that we know what works to effectively prevent and reduce smoking in this country, and the U.S. Surgeon General's reports on tobacco has served an instrumental role in providing this critical scientific evidence base. And this recent report on cessation is actually the 34th Surgeon General's report on tobacco that's been released since 1964, and the first such report was specifically focused on cessation since 1990, 30 years ago. Now, the primary purpose of this 2020 report is to update and expand that 1990 report. Since 1990, the scientific literature has expanded greatly on the determinants and the processes of smoking cessation, which has helped to inform the development of interventions that help smokers quit. In addition, the reach of smoking cessation interventions has increased substantially since 1990 with the emergence of innovative population-level interventions and policies that motivate smokers to quit and raise awareness of the health disparities of smoking cessation. Now, the Surgeon General's report that we're talking to you about today was coordinated by CDC using a long-standing, peer-reviewed, balanced, comprehensive process designed to safeguard scientific rigor and practical relevance of these reports from influences that could adversely affect impartiality. And so, in brief, under the leadership of a senior scientific editorial team, 32 experts wrote the initial draft of the chapters, and these contributions are summarized in the report chapters, which you'll hear about today. And these were evaluated by 46 peer reviewers. And after this initial stage of peer reviewers, more than 20 senior scientists and other experts examined the scientific integrity of the entire report as part of the second stage of peer review. And so throughout that review process, the content was revised to include studies and information that were not available when the chapters were first drafted, again, to make sure that they're as relevant and timely as possible. And so as you can see, this process doesn't happen overnight. And total compilation of this report took 3 years. And it also doesn't happen alone. It truly takes a village. More than 115 individuals contributed to the realization of this report from its conception to its release. And the full report, which is organized in 8 chapters, is more than 700 pages long, and its key findings are summarized in 10 major conclusions and 101 chapters of information. Now, before I close, I would like to note that this report follows a long-standing framework for interpreting scientific evidence, which was first developed in the 2004 Surgeon General's report. Specifically, the report provides a four-level hierarchy of categories for interpreting the strength of the evidence on a given topic. That's evidence is sufficient to infer a causal relationship, evidence is suggestive but not sufficient to infer a causal relationship, evidence is inadequate to infer the presence or absence of a relationship, and finally, evidence is suggestive of no causal relationship. However, consistent with past Surgeon General's reports on tobacco, conclusions in this report are not limited to just causal determination. They frequently include recommendations for research, policies, and other actions. This is done to ensure that the scientific evidence is summarized and presented in a way that allows it to best be translated into public health practice. So now that you've got the 411 on Surgeon General's reports on tobacco, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Rachel Branna, my colleague from the National Cancer Institute, who will review the findings from chapters 1 through 4 of the recent report on cessation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. King. I'm very honored to have been on the team to develop this report and to be here with everyone today. As we begin to delve into the findings and the recommendations of this voluminous report, I wanted to begin with a broad overview of its content. The glimpse of this table of contents shown here demonstrates the breadth of the science summarized in the report, from epidemiology to clinical and health outcomes research to basic biology and economic and policy analysis. I will present some of the major findings from the first 4 chapters, and Dr. Schauer will focus on chapters 5 to 8. Keeping with our session's theme of past, present, and future, the report's first chapter provides a historical and scientific background since the 1990 report, Smoke Cessation, and an overview of the current landscape of smoking cessation. It presents in the form of major conclusions, a roadmap for actions that can be taken to increase smoking cessation now and into the future. There were 10 major conclusions in this report, drawn from the several 100 chapter conclusions that Dr. King reviewed. This report concluded that smoking cessation is beneficial at any age, can reduce the risk of premature death, reduces the risk of cardiovascular diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, several cancers, and adverse reproductive health outcomes. It also concluded that cessation can be increased by a variety of tobacco control policies and communication approaches, of which we're very familiar, including cigarette taxes and price increases, smoke-free policies, mass media campaigns, and statewide tobacco control programs. The report also found that we have evidence-based interventions, both behavioral and pharmaceutical, that increase one's chances of successfully quitting, especially when used in combination, and that these evidence-based approaches are also cost-effective. It covers insurance, the topic of insurance coverage. Insurance coverage for smoking cessation can increase rates of quitting, but needs to cover all forms of treatment, be widely promoted, and free of barriers such as out-of-pocket costs. Importantly, the report concluded that smoking cessation reduces the substantial financial burden from smoking, both to the individual and on the societal level. However, the report's conclusions also highlight some remaining challenges. While most smokers attempt to quit in fear, only a minority use of evidence-based cessation strategies like behavioral counseling and multiple FDA-approved medications. And there is significant disparity still in both smoking and the population markers of smoking cessation, such as quit attempts. In populations who have a higher prevalence of smoking, they are less likely to engage in these smoking cessation behaviors. So we have more work to do. Of note, the report also touched on the science pertaining to e-cigarettes in the context of smoking cessation. This report really emphasizes and acknowledges the heterogeneity in these products. The whole product class represents several hundred types of products, and the use behaviors, which are also heterogeneous, and complicates making generalizations about their efficacy for smoking cessation. So the scientific conclusion states that at this time there is inadequate evidence to conclude that e-cigarettes in general increase smoking cessation. Now we'll move to the second chapter of this report, which really documents the key distributions, trends, and determinants of smoking and smoking cessation behaviors. It focuses on both current status and trends over time, and primarily focuses on adults, but there are data and conclusions about cessation among youth and young adults. And when I refer to adults, young adults, and youth, the terms correspond to the age ranges listed here, such as 18 and above for adults and 18 or 24 for young adults. The evidence presented in Chapter 2 really illustrates the progress we've made and the work that we have to do. In the U.S., more than 3 out of every 5 adults who were ever cigarette smokers have quit smoking. And smoking cessation behaviors like quit attempts have also increased. The use of evidence-based cessation counseling and the FDA-approved cessation medications have increased among adult cigarette smokers. Yet, more than 2/3 of adult cigarette smokers who tried to quit in the past year did not use those evidence-based treatments. So really, that is a major opportunity. Receiving advice from health professionals to quit smoking has also increased dramatically in the past decades. Yet 4 out of every 9 adult cigarette smokers who saw a health professional in the past year did not receive this advice to quit. Cigarette smoking also remains highest among certain populations, such as people with mental health conditions, substance use disorders, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender adults, and American Indian and Alaska Native populations. And there are marked disparities not just in smoking, but in the cessation behaviors among some population subgroups, such as those defined by factors like educational attainment, poverty status, and race ethnicity. And these disparities may be affected by these systemic issues, such as lower levels of receiving advice to quit from a health professional, or less use of evidence-based treatment. The graph I'm showing you here shows the quit ratio, or the percentage of adult ever smokers who have quit smoking over time. This graph starts at the year that the first SPR on smoking and health was published in 1964, and the last data point is in 2017. You can see here that across age ranges, these time trends in quit ratios vary. While it's encouraging that more than half of ever smokers have quit, younger smokers have a lower quit ratio compared to older smokers. For instance, the most recent data for the young adults shows that their quit ratio is only around 30%, just half of the average here, shown here. So, however, over the past several years, young adults and adults at age 44 have shown slight increases in their quit ratios, but this still represents an opportunity to do better. Chapter 3 of the report reviewed research into the basic biology of smoking and smoking cessation. These lines of investigation provide very important insights that complement the epidemiology and intervention research presented in the report. But I do want to emphasize that this chapter discusses new biological insights, and thus by very nature is more explorative and covers novel topics. As such, not surprisingly, all of the conclusions in this chapter met the suggestive but not sufficient threshold and category for causal influence. This type of work is important to inform ongoing dialogue about cessation, but these are emerging topics that warrant more nuanced research and understanding to support stronger recommendations and communication. The chapter reviews the evidence in 4 different domains of biological insight: cellular and molecular biology of nicotine addiction, immunotherapies including vaccines as treatments for nicotine addiction, the neurobiology of smoking cessation, and the genomic factors in smoking, nicotine addiction, and smoking cessation. The conclusions in this chapter are presented on this slide, as I said, categorized as suggestive but not sufficient. And while I will not go through in detail every one of these specific conclusions, I will summarize some of the main insights from this research. The cellular and molecular mechanisms of nicotine addiction, including the rewarding properties of nicotine, withdrawal symptoms, and relapse, are now pretty well known. We have good animal models and a wide array of medications that target various neurotransmitter systems, and new ones are in development. Brain imaging technologies such as MRI and fMRI have really helped advance our understanding of how the brain changes during addiction, withdrawal, and during the pharmacotherapy treatment with the FDA-approved medication, and how smoking cues and anti-smoking messages affect brain function. Vaccines generate adequate levels of nicotine-specific antibodies that can block the addictive effects of nicotine to aid smoking cessation. However, despite these promising results from animal studies, more research is really needed in humans to develop nicotine vaccines without intolerable side effects. And the evidence from the genetic research reviewed in this chapter found that the effectiveness of nicotine replacement therapy may vary across specific genotype groups. This suggests that someday we may be able to tailor cessation treatments to specific genotypes, which would maybe perhaps make treatment less of a trial and error process. However, this chapter really underscores that more research is needed regarding nicotine dependence and the role that genes play in smoking, nicotine addiction, and in cessation. The last chapter I'll review in my time is Chapter 4 on the health benefits of smoking cessation. Smoking cessation has numerous health benefits documented here that cut across both organ systems and age groups. And this chapter really extensively reviewed that evidence with particular attention to how these risks change after smoking cessation for the major types of chronic diseases and reproductive health outcomes. So based on strong scientific evidence reviewed in this chapter, it shows that smoking cessation is linked to reductions in the risk of 12 types of cancers, both as initial diagnosis and also following cancer diagnosis, for instance, like recurrence. Morbidity, it reduces morbidity and mortality of disease from cardiovascular disease and stroke, and cessation can even improve outcomes for adults who have already been diagnosed with coronary heart disease. Reduces the risk of respiratory disease like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And finally, smoking cessation can reduce a variety of adverse reproductive health outcomes, including low birth weight and preterm birth. Beyond these disease-specific benefits, smoking cessation at any age can yield broader health benefits, including increasing life expectancy by up to a decade. And all of these benefits not only accrue to the person who lives 10 years longer after quitting smoking, but to all of us through more time with our family members who smoke, reduced healthcare costs, and decreased secondhand smoke exposure. So in summary, the evidence reviewed in this chapter on health benefits demonstrates that it's never too late to quit. Thank you for your attention today, and our next speaker is Dr. Jillian Fowler from CDC.
Thank you, Dr. Grana. Like Dr. Grana, I'm also honored to have been a senior editor on this important report and happy to be with you today. I'll be talking about the second half of the report, which includes scientific updates to the health economics of smoking cessation, a review of the evidence surrounding effective interventions that can increase the chances of quitting from the individual to the population level, and future considerations for smoking cessation and for tobacco control in general. Now, we've just heard about multiple health benefits that follow smoking cessation. Decreases in the morbidity and mortality from smoking-related illness are also one of the chief drivers of the economic benefits of smoking cessation. And Chapter 5 discusses that in more depth. Sufficient level conclusions from this chapter span from the individual to the system to society, and they include that smoking cessation improves well-being, quality of life, and overall health status, that smoking cessation reduces mortality and increases the lifespan, that smoking has a high cost to smokers, healthcare systems, and society, and that smoking cessation interventions are cost-effective. Now, in terms of helping smokers to quit, evidence supports multiple types of clinical and public health interventions. In 2008, the U.S. Public Health Service released a clinical practice guideline on treating tobacco use and dependence, and this year's Surgeon General's report builds on that guidance and adds more than a decade of additional research. Chapter 6 not only reviews the evidence around interventions to help people quit, but also the evidence around modes or methods for delivering those interventions, settings in which those interventions can be delivered, and teachable moments in which cessation interventions can have a particular impact. Similar to the 2008 Public Health Service guideline, this report found sufficient evidence that behavioral counseling and cessation medications are independently effective in increasing smoking cessation, and that they're even more effective when they're used together. This particular combination of counseling and medicine can increase smoking cessation compared to self-help materials or no treatment. In terms of behavioral interventions themselves, the report found sufficient evidence that proactive quitline interventions used alone or in combination with medicine can increase cessation. And proactive in this case means that the quitline is reaching out to the individual. The intervention is not dependent on the individual to reach out to the quitline. The report, as I said, also looked at how we deliver behavioral interventions, and there the evidence was sufficient to infer that short text messages about quitting independently increase smoking cessation, and that those are most effective when they're interactive or tailored to individual responses. The report also found sufficient evidence that web or internet-based interventions increase smoking cessation, especially when they deliver proven behavior change techniques, like, for example, if they include motivational interviewing or cognitive behavioral therapy. The evidence was inadequate for smartphone applications at this time. So let's talk a little bit about cessation medications or medicines. The evidence is sufficient that combining short-acting nicotine replacement medicines like the nicotine gum or lozenge with a long-acting form like the nicotine patch increases smoking cessation compared to using just one form of nicotine replacement therapy. And this conclusion is an important addition to previous federal reports on tobacco cessation treatment. With regard to e-cigarettes or electronic cigarettes, the report acknowledges that they comprise a heterogeneous class of products, including disposable devices, rechargeable devices, tanks and mods, and the most recent nicotine salt mod pods. At this time, the evidence is inadequate to infer that e-cigarettes in general increase smoking cessation. The evidence is suggestive but not sufficient to infer that using e-cigarettes that contain nicotine is associated with an increase in smoking cessation compared to using e-cigarettes that do not contain nicotine. And finally, the evidence is suggestive but not sufficient to infer that more frequent use of e-cigarettes is associated with increased smoking cessation compared to less frequent use of e-cigarettes. And I should mention that the e-cigarette conclusions in this report are similar to the conclusions from the 2018 National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine report, and that this report also acknowledges that these conclusions need to be considered in the broader context of youth use of e-cigarettes. Now, moving beyond interventions that target individual smokers, Chapter 7 discusses strategies that have been shown to be effective in promoting cessation within clinical and healthcare systems, as well as in the broader society. Within clinical and healthcare systems, first, the use of evidence-based clinical guidelines, such as the U.S. Public Health Service guideline that I referred to earlier, increases utilization of clinical interventions for smoking cessation. Second, tobacco cessation insurance coverage that is comprehensive, barrier-free, evidence-based, and adequately promoted increases the availability and utilization of smoking cessation treatment. And in this case, barrier-free means that there are no pre-certification requirements, no co-pays or deductibles, and comprehensive means that a variety of smoking cessation treatments would be covered. Third, linking smoking cessation-related quality of care measures with payments to clinicians, clinics, or health systems can increase the delivery of clinical treatment for smoking cessation. And finally, tobacco quit lines, which is what Under Quit Now, are an effective population-based approach to encourage quit attempts and increase smoking cessation. Now, a number of broad tobacco control policy efforts have been shown to increase smoking cessation, and those include increasing the price of cigarettes, smoke-free policies, mass media campaigns like CDC's Tips from Former Smokers, comprehensive state-based tobacco control programs, and according to CDC guidance, comprehensive includes providing adequate levels of funding for such programs, and then large health warnings on cigarette packaging in the form of pictures. Now, most of these interventions also have additional benefits to tobacco control, including reduction in smoking prevalence and cigarette consumption. There are additional policy efforts that may increase the smoking cessation rates, and those include plain packaging of cigarettes and other tobacco products, decreasing the availability of tobacco products and the exposure to tobacco marketing and advertising at the point of sale, restricting the sale of menthol and other flavored types of tobacco products. Now, the report's final chapter, Chapter 8, brings together information about the history, the current status, and the future prospects for helping even more U.S. smokers to quit as one important step towards a tobacco-free society. As shown on this figure, while per-person cigarette consumption has decreased by around 75% since the release of the first Surgeon General's report on smoking and health in 1964, per capita cigarette consumption remains equal to about 1 pack of cigarettes per adult per week. Also notable from this figure is that major policy and communications advances in tobacco control, things like increasing the price of cigarettes and banning broadcast advertising, have frequently been followed by decreases in cigarette consumption. In 2014, on the 50th anniversary of the first U.S. Surgeon General's report on smoking and health, another Surgeon General's report was released, which, among other things, tried to anticipate ways that we might continue to work towards ending the epidemic of tobacco-related disease. Approaches discussed in that report included, among other things, reducing the nicotine content and the overall toxicity of cigarettes and tobacco products, and reducing or more strictly regulating the overall supply, availability, and sale of tobacco products. As we've mentioned previously, the 2020 Surgeon General's report, as well as all previous reports and additional related materials, are available on the websites of the CDC Office on Smoking and Health and the Office of the Surgeon General. Thank you so much for your time and for your interest in this important report. While this report focused on adults, as we look to the future and specifically as we look to ways to help youth and their use of tobacco products, I'm honored to introduce our final speaker for today, Dr. Amanda Graham, who's the Chief of Innovations at the Truth Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schauer. For those of you who are not familiar with Truth Initiative, we are the largest nonprofit public health foundation in the U.S. dedicated to making tobacco use a thing of the past, especially among young people. My talk today will review the current status of tobacco product use among youth, the evidence behind various cessation strategies, and the impact of a youth vaping cessation program that we developed at Truth Initiative. These are data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey over the past decade, showing the percentage of high school students reporting past 30-day tobacco product use. The very good news is that cigarette smoking is at an all-time low, and the use of most other types of tobacco products has also been either declining or stable. In contrast, there's been a steady increase in youth e-cigarette use, most notably over the past few years. What you can see on this chart is that in 2019, 27.5% of high school students reported past 30-day e-cigarette use. We know that nicotine exposure among young people can have lifelong negative impacts, which make these data about e-cigarette use very troubling. Many of the tobacco cessation interventions that have been tested among young people overlap with the adult approaches that Dr. Schauer just reviewed. These include various types of behavioral counseling delivered through channels specifically designed to reach and engage young people, like school-based interventions and technology-based programs. Nicotine replacement therapy and several prescription cessation medications have also been tested among young people, though neither form of treatment is currently approved for use among adolescents. This slide summarizes the evidence behind these different cessation strategies from the most recent Cochrane systematic review that was published in 2017. What you can see is that group counseling was the only behavioral intervention that showed a statistically significant effect in promoting cessation, and none of the medications that were tested were effective among adolescents. A systematic review by Volanti and colleagues that was published just last month found that text message interventions are effective for promoting cessation among young adults. Two things worth noting on this slide: there have been many more studies of behavioral interventions than medications, and the vast majority of trials have focused on cigarette cessation. To date, there are no published trials of e-cigarette cessation interventions. So this last slide may seem like dismal news for young people who are interested in quitting tobacco, but there are a number of promising innovations that include web and app-based programs, new approaches being rolled out by state quit lines, and school curricula for middle and high school students. For many years, the primary focus has been on preventing youth tobacco use, and so it's exciting to see the increased focus on cessation from academic groups, government agencies, and the private sector. There are also resources and interventions targeted to parents and guardians of young people. Many of these interventions focus on basic education about e-cigarettes, how to recognize the devices, how to talk to a child about vaping, and most importantly, how to help a child quit vaping. At Truth Initiative, we developed a text message program specifically to help young people quit vaping called This Is Quitting. The program is theory-based